Hi, I'm Jane from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make a 9-inch Baton Rouge quilt block. You can use this quilt block to make a quilt, and here are 3 different options. The first one is the quilt block repeated. The second one is the same quilt block but with sashings and cornerstones, and the third option is the quilt block placed on point. So I've used my quilt block notebook to draw out the block and to work out what size of pieces you're going to need. So for this block you're going to need 8 2.5-inch squares in background fabric and 4 3¼ inch squares. In fabric A you're going to need 4 3¼ inch squares. In fabric B you're going to need 4 2.5 by 1.5-inch rectangles, and in fabric C you're going to need 4 2.5 by 1.5-inch rectangles and 1 1.5-inch square. So we're going to start by making the half square triangles, and for this we're going to need the 3¼ inch squares in background fabric and fabric A. So I'll put all the other fabrics to one side. So on the wrong side of the background fabrics we're going to draw a line from corner to corner. I'm going to pin these right sides together. So I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch on both sides of the drawn line. I'm now going to remove the pins and then cut along the drawn line. I'm going to show you 2 ways to trim the half square triangles, and the first way is with a standard ruler. So I'm going to start by pressing this. So I'm going to set the seam and press towards the dark fabric. Now we're going to trim this piece to 2.5 inches square. So with your ruler, you're going to line the 45-degree line on the ruler along your seam line, and then make sure that the bottom and left sides are a bit bigger than 2.5 inches. And then we're going to cut up one side and along the top. Then you're going to rotate the piece underneath, line that 45-degree line up again, and this time the bottom and left edges need to be exactly 2.5 inches. And then you're going to cut up one side and along the top. Now I prefer to use the Quilt in a Day 6.5 inch triangle square up ruler, and for this you leave your piece folded and then you line the 2.5 inch line of the ruler on your stitch line, and then you trim up one side and down the other. So I'm going to continue that with the rest of them. So I'm now going to press the seams for these. And in the same way that I did before, I'm going to set the seam and press them towards the darker fabric. And then once I've done all of that, I'm going to cut the dog ears off. So I've laid the pieces out in block order, and I'm going to start by pairing these together. And whilst I'm here, I'm going to pin these together as well. So I'm going to take those over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set the seams and press them open. So I've placed them back out in block layout, and now I'm going to join these pairs together to make 4 patches. So I'm going to take those to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. set the seams and press them open. So I've laid these out in block order, and now I'm going to sew them together in columns. So I'm going to take those over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set the seams and press them open. So back in block layout, I'm going to sew the bottom pieces to the columns. So I'm going to take those to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm now going to set the seams and press them open again. So back in block layout, I can sew the 2 of the columns together. And here we want to make sure that we don't lose our points. So you can right mouse click on the link above, and that will take you to my video on how to get perfect points. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set the seam and press it open. And now we've got the last column to piece together for this block. So I'm going to take that back over to the sewing machine for the last seam of this block. So I'm going to set the seam and press it open. Congratulations! You have made the 9-inch Baton Rouge Quilt Block.